Hello, and welcome to another book review. And today, I want to talk to you about Only a Monster by Vanessa Len. Kind of going off brand for me with this one. This is technically a young adult fantasy novel. I don't typically read young adult novels, but this was gifted to me, and it sounded intriguing, and it had a lot of praise from a bunch of authors, including Naomi Novik, who is apparently a friend of Vanessa Len. I love Naomi Novik's works. I said, you know what? I'm going to check it out. I had been gifted this OwlCrate Exclusive Edition. It comes with a nice little handwritten note from Vanessa. Not handwritten. I mean, it's she wrote it at one point, and this is just a copy of that. But nice little note from Vanessa. Comes with some stamping on the boards itself, black sprayed page edges, and a reversible dust jacket that features the wonderful young adult trope of depicting the characters to help the young adult readers to visualize the characters, which, I mean, sure, that might as well be a thing. But anyways, it had Naomi Novik's seal of approval, and that's enough for me. Only a Monster is the first of a series. I don't know if I'm necessarily going to follow up with the sequels, just because I haven't been gifted the second title, and I'm just going to blissfully pretend it doesn't exist, and that pretend there were unanswered questions at the end of Only a Monster, which makes me a monster in my own regards. But anyways, Only a Monster features your typical young adult story where you have your teenager who discovers that all is not well, that you have the story where a teenager discovers that they are part of something bigger, whether they're the chosen one or whether they have a special power, whether they're in a long lineage of some fancy family. And Only a Monster is technically no exception to that, although it does kind of turn that trope on its head. Joan, the teenage main character, discovers that her family is a long line of monsters. So instead of her discovering that she's the chosen one, she discovers that the boy she's going on a date with, he's the chosen one. And in fact, her family are technically the bad guys. A little bubbling there, but that's what it is. Yeah, which, I mean, it's a little bit of a different, shake up to that trope, which was interesting. Now, what do I mean by they're monsters? I don't mean they have their claws and sharp teeth and they're, mauling and killing people. Although I guess they are kind of killing people in their own way. No, monsters for them, in the realm of Only a Monster, means that they steal time from people. So they have the ability to time travel. Like if you want to go back a week, you have to steal a week from somebody else, from just some random stranger, for example. And through touch, they can steal that week from them, which means that person's lifespan is now a week shorter, and then you can travel forward a week, backward a week, whichever way you want to go. You can do all sorts of time travel. But yeah, that's just the broad term used to describe them. They're just like, oh, we're monsters, which I guess, I mean, I feel like you could have given another name to it. I guess, saying you're monsters, I guess you're doing kind of monstrous things and taking time away from people, but it just didn't, it felt too general of a term. But anyways, you do get some of your tropes here where she all's not what it seems, like I've said before. Some, for lack of a better word, some shit hits the fan, and she finds herself having to team up with a member of a rival monster family, someone who by nature should hate her guts. And the feeling is mutual. They don't like each other, and they team up to basically try to save themselves, save their families, and do all that other fun young adult trope stuff. Yeah, time travel is involved. I mean, the concept is there. The concept wasn't bad. I will say the characters are bad. Yeah. I mean, the chosen one, the Nick, he was ruthless. Man, I mean, it was nice to kind of change it up so where you're not really necessarily following who would traditionally be the protagonist. But I almost kind of wish there was more of him in the novel, just because, I mean, he was almost like an anti-hero in his own way. He has no qualms killing monsters. and killing those that he deems monsters. Joan, the main character, she is dumb. And not like teenage in a young adult novel dumb. I mean, she's dumb even for that. Uh, it's it's very apparent from, she's talking about, oh, my family always said we were monsters. Oh, my family's always doing this weird stuff. Or, oh, my grandmother, whom she lives with, is constantly moving houses every, 2 years, which it sounds suspicious. Maybe your grandmother's a tax evader, but your family doesn't seem to be hiding the fact that they're monsters. That generic monster term. So the fact that you weren't able to figure this out until if this novel takes place, just goes to show how stupid of a character you are, Joan. And then there is some time travel involved, especially with Aaron, who is the rival family member who helps her on the quest. And it just, he tries to explain that you can't change time. You can't, like, you can go to the past, but almost like Stephen King's 11/22/63, you can't change what's going to happen. Like, time will fight back, which is a very interesting concept. And it's a concept that takes chapter after chapter after chapter of explaining to her, because she immediately runs off to try to change time. And she does this for like 5 chapters in a row. And I'm like, you are so dumb. But anyways, she's pretty bad. And that is probably the weakest point of the novel. I mean, I feel like with better characters, it could have been a superb novel. I mean, the concept is there. I wish you had a different term other than just monsters. The final third was actually really good. There were some twists that I did not see coming. Some creative problem solving on Joan's part, which completely goes against the absolute stupidity of the character from the first half of the novel. I commend her for that. Minor nitpick: Aaron, who they go back to the 90s. That's not really a spoiler. Time travel, something happens, and they're like, we need to do what we can, and they go back to the 90s. And Joan, upon getting to the 90s, starts looking in garbage cans for a newspaper, expecting to find a newspaper with a date on it. So she can rip it open and say, oh my God, this is what the date, this is, I know where we are. And she goes, that's what happened in Back to the Future. And Aaron gives her a blank stare and says, I don't know what Back to the Future is. Which Aaron, it kind of seems in line with his character. His character is very preppy. He seems to have been from much more formal times. It makes sense that he wouldn't be accustomed to pop culture references like Back to the Future. But then on the very next page, he identifies what year they're in based off of other pop culture. He knows they're in the 90s based off early 90s, based off grunge t-shirts, and knowing that Friends isn't on TV because nobody has Rachel haircuts. And I'm like, you're telling me that you know these pop culture references, but you are completely unfamiliar with Back to the Future. I mean, sure, I guess. I don't know. It's not like there were decades between Back to the Future and the early 90s. Hell, I think Back to the Future Part 3 was 1990, wasn't it? Or maybe it was 89. Like, I feel like you can't be dumb to those pop culture references and then immediately being encyclopedia pop culture references on the very next page. It's stuff like that. Like, you need some feedback here, Vanessa. But I mean, I can't say that I'm one to talk because you're the one that got the book published. And I mean, for a first novel, it's not bad. I mean, it reads like a first novel. It reads like a young adult novel. You're going to have your teenage tropes. But if you're looking for a time traveling romp involving just sometimes absolutely like bloody slaughter, which happens, I mean, then you'll probably like Only a Monster. I mean, I wouldn't say it's necessarily the same as Naomi Novik, who has clearly inspired Len. But if you like Naomi Novik, you'll probably like Only a Monster. It's just a more young adult version of Naomi Novik. Which, like I said, you get your mileage worth out of it. I mean, if you can find a cheap copy, which, I mean, you should be able to, it's, I think, readily available at any bookstore you go into, then you can find it for cheap. The OwlCrate version, I think, is probably sold out. This was from 2022, so right now this is my last or second last book review of 2023. So I'm, a year behind. I know the sequel is already out, and I believe there's going to be a third one as well. I mean, it definitely leaves itself open to a sequel. It has a decent enough ending where if there wasn't a sequel, you can totally live your life fine with that. I mean, there are open-ended questions that don't get answered that are clearly there for a sequel. But as far as the plot itself goes, it resolves itself fine in a decent way. Like I said, I mean, there's actually some pretty interesting problem solving in the last third that making the last third probably the most enjoyable portion of it. But anyways, yeah, that's Vanessa Len's Only a Monster. Oh yeah, well, another thing I'll mention is, I mean, I am obviously not British, and I am not incredibly steep in British culture. But the entire novel takes place in the UK, and Len is also not British. She's Australian, which I guess, I mean, you're technically, or at one point you were part of the British Empire, but not within Len's lifetime. But anyways, because it's me not being a Brit, I thought it was handled very well. There was never a point where I'm reading this and saying, well, you're clearly not British. You're just, somebody doing a British pantomime. But, I mean, maybe that's not me to say because I'm not British. But, I mean, I felt when I was reading The Queen of Summer's Twilight by Charles Vess, I was reading that and thinking to myself, you're clearly not Scottish. You're doing a bad Scottish impression. And I didn't get that with Only a Monster, so I suppose that's probably a good thing as well. But anyways, hope you enjoyed this book review. If it's sold yet, Only a Monster, sound off in the comments below. Like I said, it's not a bad read. It's different from me because I'm not particularly accustomed to young adult novels, but it was decent. I didn't hate it. I have plenty of other book reviews on the channel, do at least one a week, try to do 2 lately. Plenty of unboxing videos in between here and there to check out as well. So please consider liking and subscribing, and we'll see you around next time.